all of the things that work in the movie work so well. It's just that there's so much excess. There's so much abundance. There's so much more in it than it needs. And if you trim the fat a little bit, you might have like an almost perfect kids movie. On this week's Movie HighLow, we're talking Lost Boys, Neverland, and trying to find our happy thought. To live would be an awfully big adventure. This is Steven Spielberg's Hook.
Welcome back to our show.
Hey.
Good to hear from you again.
Very excited to get into this week's episode. How are you feeling about talking about this movie that we're going to be chatting about as a low?
I guess when I think about my childhood memories of seeing it, I never thought that someday I'd be doing a podcast review on it, but yeah.
Welcome back to Movie HighLow, a podcast discussing the best and worst that cinema has to offer. I'm Dom.
This is Dee.
And this week's movie is Hook, directed by Steven Spielberg. Released...
'Cause the heart brings you back.
Let's not kid ourselves, that's a banger right there. Released on December 11th, 1991. This is technically a low episode. Says who? The brain trust at IMDb.
Not us.
Not well.
I mean.
Let's see. The brain trust at IMDb currently rated at a 6.8, which is actually higher than I would have expected. The consensus at Rotten Tomatoes has it scored at 37%. The experts at Letterboxd give it an overall 3.5 out of 5. This movie was actually nominated for several Academy Awards, all technical and music related: Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Visual Effects, Best Makeup, and Best Music Original Song by John Williams, the song When You're Alone, that Maggie sings.
Yeah.
But also nominated for a Razzie, Worst Supporting Actress Julia Roberts as Tinkerbell.
I don't think she was that bad, but okay.
I don't either, but we should definitely talk about that. What's interesting is that less than 100 movies have this distinction of being nominated for both an Oscar and a Razzie.
That's not a very common thing.
Not a very common thing.
No.
While Hook was a box office success, it's generally considered a failure, mostly because of mixed to poor reviews, and Spielberg, even himself, has been very vocal about his kind of dissatisfaction with the movie. He openly has said that it's one of his least favorite movies, and he's admitted that he even struggles to watch it.
I wonder why he feels that way considering all the saccharine choices he's made.
Yeah, well.
You think you'd hold a special place in his heart or something?
I think when it didn't launch the way that he hoped it would, that might have been the thing that made him push back from it, disassociate a little bit. But for anyone who has not seen the movie, can you please read the synopsis?
Peter Banning is a high-powered early 90s corporate lawyer, which means he's got a chunky cell phone, no time for his kids, and the emotional availability of a fax machine. But when his children are kidnapped during a family trip to London, Peter discovers something extremely inconvenient. He is, in fact, the one and only, real-life Peter Pan. In order to save his kids, Peter will be dragged back to Neverland by Tinkerbell, where he learns that Captain Hook has spent decades obsessing over a rematch with a man he finds can no longer fly, fight, or crow. Will Peter be able to rediscover his imagination in time to save his children? Or will James Hook defeat the spineless, pasty, bloated codfish the Pan has now become?
So what is your first association with this movie? Do you remember when you first saw it?
Yeah, it wasn't in theaters. It was at home, and I told you I have this random memory. I've seen it more than once. One memory for some reason that always sticks out in my mind is I have this memory of, like, it was Christmas time, Thanksgiving, Christmas time. I remember all the candles being in the windows and it playing off in the other room. I think I was in my parents' master bath, and it was playing off in their bedroom, and I think maybe one of my brothers was watching it or something and, like, catching it after my bath, and, like, just... I have this random memory of it.
In general, you got the warm and fuzzies when you think about this movie.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I remember seeing it in the theater, actually, when it came out in 1991. I would have been 7 years old, and I've seen it many, many times since. I basically know the movie by heart. I have a lot of affection for this movie. Watching it as an adult, I can objectively acknowledge that it has one enormous central problem. So last week on the Jaws episode, if we were kind of talking about less is more, I think this week with Hook, what we're seeing is more is too much.
Right.
Coming off of Jaws, where limitation forced creativity, Hook is kind of almost the exact opposite side of the coin. Spielberg has everything at his disposal in this movie. He's got movie stars, he's got huge sets, massive score, and he's got full permission to overindulge in his sensibility as a sentimental maximalist. And the problem with that is not that the movie magic doesn't work. The movie magic does work, and then he keeps shoveling more on top of it.
Mm-hmm. to the point where it's like you're getting a toothache.
When Spielberg is allowed to turn himself up to an 11, he lays it on pretty
It's to
thick.
the own detriment of his own movie.
There's a term in writing when you're adding unnecessary embellishments or you're overcomplicating something that's already working. They call that putting a hat on a hat. That's basically what Spielberg is guilty of doing this entire movie. He's constantly putting a hat on a hat.
Or like I would say, I mean, this might not be a coined phrase or comparison, but trimming the fat in movie, trimming the fat, this would be like adding padding. It's like you're putting fluff and cotton in there that like, it's already good. Like you don't need to add more padding to it.
The heart works, and then Spielberg keeps underlining it and circling it and adding music and adding dialogue and adding one more reaction shot or adding one more sentimental button. It's the overriding problem of the movie. And we can get into the specifics because I think there are certain scenes where this is more apparent than others. But to start, I think it's fair that we should maybe start talking about what ultimately works in the movie, because there's a lot that does work in this movie. Highs. For me, the number one high, the biggest high of this movie is Rufio.
I like Tootles.
I like Tootles too. But I mean, Rufio is such an iconic character. He's not one of the original Lost Boys. He's a complete invention. He's something that's specific and internal to this movie. He's the best character in the movie, even his intro song. Rufio, Rufio, Rufio. It's been living in my head since I was a kid.
He's a good, strong character. I do like the part where he's got this rivalry going with Peter Pan because he doesn't want to lose his place as like the number one and among the Lost Boys, even though he did take it from, I guess, Peter Pan when Peter Pan left. But when he decides that, you know, wow, Pan has returned, and he kind of gets down on one knee and hands him the sword, like I like that whole scene too. It shows that he's a child or a young man of honor.
I think the internal logic of his character makes sense for the movie. Peter Pan leaves Neverland, and the Lost Boys would naturally gravitate towards the oldest or biggest of the group, right? All of them kind of seem like they're middle school aged or younger. Rufio is the one teenager. So it kind of feels like they would naturally gravitate towards him, accept him as the leader.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, even in the end where he decides to give this sword to, what was his name?
Thudbutt.
Thudbutt, yeah, exactly. It's like, because he says, because he's bigger, he's like, look out for the ones that are little than you.
I think another high is Smee.
Obviously, yeah, Bob Hoskins.
Bob Hoskins is a national treasure.
Right.
That character is just hilarious. I'm smiling every single time he shows up on camera. Smee, what about Smee?
What about me?
There are three roles that Bob Hoskins plays that have
Eddie
always
Valiant,
stuck with
for
me.
sure.
Eddie Valiant, you know, obviously Mario, and then this one, Smee. What is it about this character that makes me love that performance more than the other two? I'm thinking about it and I'm like, I think what it is that he has to do an accent. This is the one movie where he's kind of, you can kind of hear him just doing, his own like kind of Cockney. It just makes him more funny.
Yeah, I know, like when at the end of the movie where Peter Pan wakes up from his dream or whatever, and it's like,
In trouble with the missus?
Yeah.
This is an obvious one, and I kind of put these two together. But I think the casting of Robin Williams as Pan and the casting of Dustin Hoffman as Hook is kind of perfect, because Robin Williams was the boy in the man's body who never grew up.
He captured that essence.
All the little tags where he's just like, I never did drugs, I missed the 60s, I was an accountant. Those are things I would imagine aren't in the script, shit that he added. Firefly from Hell, when he's getting into the fight with Rufio, even called him nearsighted gynecologist. I can't imagine that was in the script. That's got to be something Robin Williams is just throwing out there.
I know. There are quite a few of them. What is this, Lord of the Flies preschool?
Shit like that. Those are all things that you know are him. Preschool. He's doing that. That's not in the script.
Dustin Hoffman was enigmatic, obviously, and I don't think he'd ever been in a role quite like that before. He never. How many villains or bad guys did Dustin Hoffman ever really play in movies before this? Not many, probably.
None that immediately jumped to mind.
So it's like for him to play this type of character. I mean, he really stood up to the challenge of it. He rose to the challenge.
And just chewing it up. Like he's having a blast. He is like chewing up every scene that he's in. I hate Peter Pan. Like Dustin Hoffman as Captain Hook is the only version of Captain Hook that I can see in my head post this movie. I know there have been other versions.
I know. We kind of briefly saw last night, like snippets from other ones. I'm like, ugh.
This is a weird high. The title of the movie is a high for me. I love that the movie's called Hook. It works. It's appropriate. I feel like it's much better than if it were called Pan. Ultimately, Hook is the catalyst that gets the whole story in motion, because Peter Banning character, it's not like he's looking to reconnect with his old persona or recapture his youth. And it's not until Hook barges back into his life to reclaim victory that the chain of events is set into motion that actually brings Peter back into being Peter Pan. And I love the one shot when the hook is carried back and you see it get connected to his hand for the first time, and it's just a shot of like the fireworks spark behind the hand as the hook's being put on. There's so much iconography behind the idea of Hook, Captain Hook. The way that this movie approaches it and presents it is just like, it's part of why this movie, I think, has lasted.
It's like stuff that sticks in your head even as you grow up, like you remember those images.
All the Lost Boys scenes, this is where the movie to me feels like it's the most alive. I love how all the kids are kind of slightly styled differently. There's like the one kid who wears like the three-piece suit, and then there's like the two that look like Cub Scouts. They all kind of have their own little independent look, even though they're all kind of ragtag put together. I love the late 80s, early 90s kind of influence on the set design with the basketball courts and the skateboard half pipes. You know, the set design itself, yeah, they look like sets, but I almost prefer that than the alternative, because if they made this movie
Definitely
today,
over CGI.
yeah, if they made it today, this whole thing would have been shot on a green screen. The fact that those are all practicals.
Like that debate you told me, that famous debate or discussion between George Lucas and Martin Scorsese about, oh, you could do the 5 points with CGI. And he's like, and Scorsese's like, no, I'm gonna build it up. And I'm like, thank God he did, because that movie looks amazing, and you feel like you're invested in that world because of how it looks. If it was CGI, are you kidding me? Like, even some of the movies we grew up with from the 80s and the 90s, it's like the claymation or the practical effects and stop motion looks better than any CGI you throw against it today.
Another high for this movie is I think it's got 3 beautiful scenes, like almost near perfect scenes. And the first one happens even before we get to Neverland, which is kind of incredible. After Peter yells at the kids when he's on the phone doing the deal, and he's like, Moira,
shut up.
Yeah, get him out of here. I want the phone call of my life. His wife, Moira, played by Caroline Goodall, very empathetically kind of reads him the riot act when she's doing the whole monologue about your kids love you, they want to play with you, how long do you think that lasts? Her explaining to him that time is going by so quickly and he's blowing it, and he'll never forgive himself if he misses these kids' childhood.
He's already started to, right?
He is. He's actively missing it right now.
Right. You see that he goes to his daughter's play, and then he can't not be on his phone for half of it, and then he doesn't even go to his son's game the next day when he promises, and my word is my bond. Oh yeah, like your word is shit. It's up to that point, there were a few different things that already demonstrated that he loves his family, but like he's going to put work first. He's going to put his own commitments first before that, and then he lashes out against his family, which is even more sad. And then to me, the sad part of that scene too is when it cuts to Maggie Smith. She makes the face when she first hears him screaming at the kids or whatever, and it's like she knows, oh, he grew up and he's hardened, and like it breaks her heart, because that's the whole thing. Like, under one condition, you come into this house. Nobody grows up. Like, you get that she has this sincere love for children and the innocence of being a child. But the other part of that scene that I think is so effective is that I think it's speaking to the parents in the room.
Right.
And us, not to sound completely corny and stupid, but now that we are parents, I mean, I think if I'd seen that before we had our child, it would still have affected me, but differently. But now you watch it, it's like, yeah, you think about all the little moments that like I could have chosen to play with her and not do this thing that I thought really had to get done. Because exactly in a few years that you're going to be wanting their attention. It's a very true sentiment, and I think a lot of parents need to hear, even today, especially today. You need to fix your family first.
It's also great because in a big way, it is the foreshadowing of what's ultimately to come for the Peter Banning character, which is like, you're going to have to learn how to play. You're going to have to learn how to be in the present, be in the moment. Reconnecting with Peter Pan is reconnecting with your children to a certain degree. The second beautiful scene in the movie is once they're in Neverland, Peter's met the Lost Boys. There's the point where Rufio draws the line in the sand with the sword, and he says, if you don't think that this is Peter Pan, you step over the line. And everyone does, except for one kid.
Little David Alan Grier.
Little David Alan Grier. Pockets is his name. He pulls Peter down to his level. He's stretching out the wrinkles in his face to see if he can see him as younger. And then he pulls his cheeks back so it looks like he's smiling. And that's when he says, oh, there you are, Peter. And then the John Williams score soars and swells, and half the kids run back over the line, and they all finally can see him. It's incredible. It's just, and then there's the great joke in the scene of every time Rufio challenges it, you know, you're going to go on his side against Capitan Hook. And then like they keep jumping the fence. They keep going back and forth either side. But it's a legitimately heartfelt scene. And it shows that when Spielberg is firing, when he knows what he's doing with this movie, he really knows what he's doing. The third beautiful scene. So after the excellent training montage, where they have the whole training montage where the Lost Boys are trying to like whip him into shape, Peter and the Lost Boys, they all sit down for dinner, but it's a game. There's no actual food at the table. So Peter doesn't see food until he gets into the verbal battle with Rufio, which is also hilarious.
You lewd, crude, rude bag of pre-chewed food, dude.
And he starts to pretend with the food fight. That's when the food appears.
The children's performances of them pretending to eat the food is all really convincing. I mean, like, it's funny. Pantomiming, eating whatever foods they're eating. You're trying to imagine what they're eating based on how they're eating it.
Once Robin Williams realizes there's no food at the table, his reaction shots are some of the funniest
Gandhi
parts.
ate more food than this, yeah, I know. Yeah.
But then when Thudbutt picks up the food and it looks like he's about to take a bite and he looks up at Peter, like, are you seeing this right now? And Peter looks at him, he's like, oh, he has like this pathetic look on his face, like, oh, like this, got nothing in your hand, man. When he takes the big bite, like all that whole back and forth interplay is hilarious. Once he's playing and he throws the food at Rufio and all of a sudden there's actual food there and they're like, you're doing it. What? You're using your imagination. The camera pulls back and you see now all of the empty plates are now filled with actual food. It's a perfect scene. It's perfect until it's not perfect. And this is kind of the transition, I think, into where Spielberg starts putting the hat on the hat. Because at that point, we got it. The point has been made. He is using his imagination. Now he can see the food. Now he's a part of the Lost Boys reality. They add this extra shot now where they cut back to all the kids and they're literally saying out loud, "You're doing it, Peter. You're playing with us.
You're playing with us, Peter. You're doing it."
And the camera comes back and it's all this big laughter and the big John Williams. Bum, 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 bum. It's the extra moment that's not needed. This to me is the start of when things start to go a little bit downhill with this movie, where it just keeps adding that extra button. That
Well, then I feel like this is around the point too where you keep hearing, particularly the daughter character reference, like the need for a mother, and my mother wouldn't be for like my mommy, like, and then the Thudbutt character asks him at one point, do you remember your mother? And
I love
like
that.
overtone.
I actually love that scene
You know,
too,
he really needs a mama. He needs a mama real badly. Like it's like it starts to become this overkill use of mommy needing a mommy. Where's your mommy? You remember your mommy? It's weird. It becomes this fetishistic view of mom sort of thing. I don't know.
Interesting.
But
let's dig into what's not working about the movie. I really have one major low for this movie that I think we can talk about maybe on a scene-by-scene basis. The biggest problem that this movie has is the runtime due to the sentimentality overload. This movie should be nowhere near 2 hours long, and yet somehow it's creeping up closer to 2.5 hours. There are so many scenes in this movie, I feel like you could either cut entirely or you could simply trim back or revise just because there's stuff that just isn't necessary.
right. No, I agree completely.
I got a list here, and I'm just gonna run through these, and you tell me what you think. First scene immediately that I hate is the cell phone quick draw thing that Robin Williams is doing. The whole sequence where they're intercutting where he's not at Jack's baseball game and it's showing him at work and it's like he's pretending to do quick draw with his cell phone with the other guys. Like, he's missing the game. We don't need shit like this. Cut this out entirely.
And then they send this random guy to like with
Right.
the camcorder. Like
Jack
what's
looks
happening?
back, his mom's there, his dad's not there, or that other asshole's there with the camcorder. It's like, that's all we need. Like, let's get out of this scene.
And then the truth is that the game might have gone on longer and he might have done a little bit better if his confidence wasn't shaken by not having his father there, because you see like he gets thrown the curveball or whatever and he misses and then the red team, whatever, wins. And maybe had his father been there and bolstered his confidence, maybe the game would have ended differently.
They dovetail that into the whole manipulation scene with Hook later when they put on the baseball game for him, and then it's run home Jack, no, yeah, backwards.
Yeah.
Home run Jack. I love that scene. The mermaid scene. This is a perfect example of something that just does not need to be in this movie.
It felt like softcore cosplay porn or something. Like, really? He falls in the water and like, here come these mermaids with pasty boobs and like you can basically almost see their boobs and like they're just gonna make out with you until you can breathe.
Basically, Tinkerbell has to get Hook to agree to give Peter Pan time to become Peter Pan again. Once Hook agrees to give Peter 3 days to become Pan again, the scene's over. It's like cut to him with the Lost Boys. Let's get out of this. They have this whole thing where he falls off the plank, he falls into the water, he's underwater, he can't breathe. These mermaids show up.
They're making out
They
with
look like
him,
they're
yeah.
making out with them, but like they're breathing into his mouth. This is just overindulgent.
Right, like what was the point of it? Like what was the point of that scene? Because you need to show some tits and fish bum.
It feels more like it's overindulgent Spielberg whimsy that's just padding the runtime and killing
But there's
the
something
pacing.
sexual about that scene.
Oh,
Do you know what I mean? So it's
definitely.
like, and it feels like it doesn't even fit. I don't know what the point of even putting a scene like that in the movie would be for.
All of the stuff with Hook and Smee together, I love. There's the one sequence early in the movie when Hook is depressed, and it's the whole like suicidal ideation scene. The joke is funny when he's got the gun to his head and he's like, "Don't try to stop me, Smee. Don't try to stop me. Try to stop me." That whole
Get
thing.
over here!
That whole thing is funny, but it's like the whole purpose of that scene, the only thing we need to establish is the idea that Smee comes up with of like, you should try to
Right,
win
right.
Jack and Maggie's favor.
And then in the end, Hook is like, "Oh, so tomorrow I'm going to say this because this is my idea." It's like,
Right.
yeah, exactly. It was,
But the
it
whole
wasn't
point
your
of the
idea,
whole
but-
point of that scene is just he needs to figure out a way to try and demoralize Peter. So that's a perfect opportunity. Like get rid of
Make
that.
your kids love him more.
Get rid of the suicide joke. Like
Right.
cut
Which I
the
also think is
time.
hilarious because I'm like, this is a movie we grew up on. It's a kids movie. It's PG, and they're hinting at suicide. I'm like I feel like they would never in a million years touch upon that in a
No.
PG movie
God,
that's
no.
geared towards kids. Even like, there's so many things that our generation growing up in movies versus how it is now. It's like would never fly.
There's the whole scene where Maggie is singing. And I think it's lovely in isolation. I just don't think it's essential to the movie that's already kind of bloated in the middle. It just feels like it would be the easiest scene to cut for time or pacing. It doesn't do anything to really advance the plot. And it's really only there to kind of remind the audience that Maggie is not forgetting about her mom and
Right.
won't be manipulated the way that Jack will be manipulated by
That
her.
she's hopeful. It creates an air of hope. And the other thing, I mean, it's not really realistic too. It's like they're supposed to be prisoners, and then here she is out on the dock, like completely free, just singing, hanging onto a sail or whatever. And then at the end of her little song, you see the sailors like wiping tears from their eyes. I'm like, okay, like is this really how this would be going down? But I mean, again, like it's Neverland, like
Well, none of those people had mommies.
right, and that's the whole thing that, especially the second half of the movie, it's mentioned almost every time she has a scene where it's like,
Mommy reads to us every night. Never forget, Mommy and Daddy. You need a mother very, very badly. He's just a middleman without a mommy. Mommy! Mommy!
even the scene I think before that,
The scene-
mommy can do it,
Right.
you know,
when
mommy can
when
do
there's
it.
the scene where he can't believe what Peter Pan has become when he first shows up and he's like, "Oh, you're this fat, pudgy codfish." Like,
Yeah.
and then he's like, "All you have to do is go up there and touch their fingers and I'll let them go." And he's like, "I'm afraid of heights," and he has to climb up there and he's trying to reach and he can't reach. It's actually, that scene's kind of devastating because from the kid's perspective, the idea of like,
Wow, my dad
you,
can't step up for
you,
me.
you can't even do this. Like,
Yeah.
you can't save us
Aren't
right
I
now.
enough of an inspiration or motivation for you to do this?
This is the
Mommy
first of
could
many
do
lines. Is
it.
the "Come on, Daddy, Mommy could do it."
I think the whole point is she's supposed to deify her mother for sure.
At the same time, they're also trying to create the idea that Neverland, once you go to Neverland, it makes you start to forget. So like Jack genuinely towards the end of the movie doesn't remember Peter when he sees him. "Don't I know that guy?" And Hook's like, "No, you never seen him a day in your life." For her, it's like you have to keep reminding yourself. I'm going to keep reminding myself of Mummy and Daddy so that I don't forget. Whereas Jack, once Hook kind of makes him resent his father, it's easier for him to forget who he is. Peter discovering his happy thought. It's a weird sequence because the way the sequence starts, which is really great, is that he discovers the treehouse where Wendy used to live. And this is a really good scene with him and Tinkerbell. She's got the dress on and she's like, "Oh, do you like this dress?" And
Which is funny too, because the Wendy character asked that before she's like, "Do you like my dress?" So it's like the whole "do you like my dress" thing comes into play twice. Yeah.
and he's starting to remember, "Oh, that's where Wendy used to sit. This is where Michael's bed was." Like he's starting to remember that, "Tink, your house used to be over here." And that's when he finds the teddy bear. And that's when it goes into this whole flashback sequence of when you see how he became an orphan, how he met Wendy, how Wendy aged over time, where she would maybe come to Neverland seasonally and then go back home. So if he's living there and she's only there for a couple months at a time or a couple weeks at a time, she would continue to age in the real world so that by the time he comes back to see her, she's an old woman. And then he meets Moira, who's her granddaughter, and he says, "I'll give her a kiss. Don't give her thimbles. I don't want her to have any of those things." And it's like, "No, I'll give her a real kiss." And this is when he decides to stay in the real world and grow up. All of that stuff I think is good, but the one part of it that doesn't make any sense is the part where it shows him as a little baby being like, I ran away from home. The visuals that Spielberg, I know that maybe they're meant to be artistic, but the visuals don't match. And then to add insult to injury, this is when you found me, Tinkerbell. All of a sudden, it's like a baby version of Tinkerbell who's like holding a leaf over his head to block the rain off of him. It's like, why is Tinkerbell a baby? Tinkerbell would be ageless. She would not have aged from a baby to an adult. She lives in fucking Neverland. None of that makes any sense. And this is the exact moment to be like, cut this down, cut this back, trim this out, make this make sense. Like, put the ideas together faster, because this whole part of it just seems kind of goofy.
Well, I mean, the other part of it too, it's like he makes it sound like early on in the movie that, you know, yeah, he's an orphan. He didn't have anybody when you took him in, helped him find a foster home, blah, blah, whatever. But then you see the scene and it's like, oh no, I guess he did come from, it looked like a mother, well-to-do, and like he probably had every advantage in life and chose as a
to be a lost
infant
boy.
To push himself away, which exactly, it's like, that wouldn't be happening. He wouldn't understand the conversation his mother's having to be like, oh, I need to get away from this. Like, what?
That sequence ends up being beautiful because the way that sequence pays off, he's saying Teddy, Teddy, and then he gets to the word daddy.
Yeah.
And then he says, that was why I decided to go and grow up, was that I wanted to be a daddy. And then there's the shot of Moira saying, you're a daddy. And she hands him Jack as a baby and he's holding Jack and he goes, I'm a daddy. They do the lighting cue where he's in the hospital and then all of a sudden he looks up and it's the lighting cue changes and he's back in the treehouse. And he's like, that was why I went back, was I wanted, and that's his happy thought.
Right, yeah.
That's his happy, is his son. And it's beautiful because it's like, this is where the movie comes full circle, is that you've been taking your family for granted all this time and here it is. That was the whole reason that you left Neverland.
Right.
And it ends up being beautiful connective tissue. It's just all the extra shit in the middle.
But again, I feel like things like that are for the parents in the audience too, because it's like, what's the most important thing? What are we doing it all for? The people you're doing it for almost feel like they're getting in the way of the things you're trying to get done, but like, you're doing it for them. So like, don't lose sight of the fact that this is the reason for living.
The big Tinkerbell scene. I think this is hands down the most egregious and unnecessary scene in the entire movie. Once Peter Pan becomes Peter Pan again, Rufio gives him back the sword. It is time to get to the final fight. Like, the fact that we literally take a several minute detour so that Peter can forget his mission and Tinkerbell becomes human size and now we create this potential love interest. It feels so unnecessary and honestly kind of creepy. If you cut that scene, it makes the goodbye scene when she's saying, you know, the place between awake and asleep where you're still remembering dreaming, that's where I'll be. That's where I'll always love you. If you cut this scene, if you cut the big Tinkerbell scene, that scene's more effective because when she's saying, I'll always love you, it's more platonic than romantic, which is what it should be between Peter and Tinkerbell.
Right, but I know, it definitely wasn't necessary to have that element to their relationship or the sexual tension thing. Like, who's that serving?
What do you think about Julia Roberts?
I don't think she was bad. I'm surprised she was nominated for a Razzie. I thought she was good in this performance.
Even watching it now, I'm like, I really like the way Tinkerbell is implemented in the story for the most part. I like the fact that obviously she is what brings Peter back to Neverland. She is the one that has to kind of yell at all the Lost Boys to be like, we need him to bangarang. She's the one that kind of gets people to believe. I also kind of like when he ends up getting into the tussle with all the pirates know her. She's throwing pirates around and fighting with them. And they're like, oh no, it's the demon fairy. All of that stuff I think works. I think what the movie does wrong by her, honestly, is trying to kind of force her into more scenes that don't need her. Right. Just trying to play off the cachet of Julia Roberts in that era.
Right, which is kind of, I think that's exactly what they were doing though.
It's not a bad performance. She didn't do anything wrong. She's good. Rufio's death. This almost qualifies as its own low, and I need to clarify this. It's not a low because it's not effective. I remember seeing this movie as a kid, and this scene absolutely devastating me. At 7 years old, watching Rufio die in Peter's arms with his last words being, you know what I wish? I wish I had a dad like you. That was gut-wrenching to see as a little kid. Now, as an adult, I have to ask, was this necessary?
Well, especially when we watched it too, it seems like they got over it pretty quickly.
Spielberg is an absolute master of tone. He has control of tone, maybe better than any director I know. But he loses the thread during the entire final fight scene with the Lost Boys and the pirates because you're watching the Lost Boys neutralize the pirates with things like eggs, marbles, paint, Thudbutt turning himself into a human bowling ball
Right,
and
here's
knocking.
an actual pistol bullet.
It's just fun. It's just total silly kid shit. Pirates are getting hit with egg on their face and they're acting like it's battery acid. You know what I mean? And in the middle of all of this juvenile fighting, Rufio gets stabbed in the f***ing chest with a sword by Captain Hook.
You know what, though? Upon reflection on that, I think that I actually get why. Because it's supposed to be like the innocence of a child being shattered by the reality, the harshness of the world kind of thing. Wake up, kids. This is how brutal the world really can be.
Well, if it's wake up kids, this is how brutal the world really can be. Maybe it plays into the fact that, to add insult to injury, the weight of his death almost
it feels like it's forgotten
evaporates
about.
instantly.
Right, I know.
Because literally within like 20 seconds, we got kids smiling, saying bangarang, and you got Peter Pan doing funny elephant noises.
Ain't no game, James.
It's like, did what we just see with Rufio actually matter or not?
Right.
Because tonally, this is
I
where
know.
it starts to go off the rails.
I remember thinking that it felt glossed over, like it just happened, and then okay, on to the next thing. It wasn't like they're all crying and having a hard time, like the Gandalf scene in Lord of the Rings, you know, like they're struggling. For Christ's sake, give him a minute, you know, whatever. Like,
For
whatever.
pity's
Like,
sake.
it's like, okay,
No, f- it, Rufio's
goes
dead.
on.
We're on.
throw him overboard. See a shark come up, meet him in the background. You know what I mean?
Ugh. I call this scene the Hook Total Recall speech. Because it's like at the end of Total Recall where, you know, the idea is, was this all a dream or did this actually happen? In the middle of the final fight with Peter, Hook has him pinned down and he starts monologuing about how you're not really Peter Pan. This is all a dream. When you wake up, you're just going to be Peter Banning, a selfish man who drinks too much and neglects his family. And then each of the kids gets to do the, I believe in you, Peter. I believe in you, Peter. I believe it's another injection of unneeded schmaltz. That whole ending sequence already kind of sells the idea that you could read the movie as either being literal or just a giant metaphor for a guy who's reconciling or reprioritizing the love of his family over his career. Like, this is another one of those hat on a hat moments. Like, we don't need Hook in the middle of this fight to start telling us this isn't even real. You might wake up and just be the same asshole you already were. Captain Hook death scene. Even as a kid, even as a 7-year-old kid, I never liked this. 7
It
years
was
old.
goofy.
I didn't think it made any sense. The stuffed dead crocodile kinda comes back to life, but not really. And it falls on him, and then Hook disappears without the thing's mouth ever even closing. And his literal last words are, "I want my mommy." Hook says that.
Well, I know, exactly. It's just like the cherry on the cake of the whole mommy fetish nonsense in this movie.
I don't know.
And then when the kids get home, isn't she an angel? It's like, oh my God, really?
What did you think of-
Everyone should have a mommy. It's like they really hit you over the head with the fucking mommy shit for some reason.
Peter's goodbye. So this is probably the worst example of Spielberg not knowing that he's already done enough and it's worked, and now he's just putting like too much sugar on it. So Peter's goodbye to the Lost Boys once the fight is over. It's wonderful. He tells all the Lost Boys that he's never going to forget them. He has to put one of them in charge. He takes the sword, he kind of hovers it around, and eventually he lands on Thudbutt, and he tells them, you got to take care of all the boys that are smaller than you. And then he flies away, and the shot is camera looking down at all the boys as it's lifting into the sky, and one of the boys steps in front of the crowd, and he says, "That was a great game. Chef's kiss. Perfect. Scene's over." Nope. Spielberg has to cut to Peter in the sky in the most sappy voice saying, "Thank you for believing in me." It's
Giant
like,
fart sound.
can you scrape some of the sugar off this?
Right.
The very ending of the movie. He gets back home. He has the goodbye with Tinkerbell. All that's great. He gets back home. He gets the call from Brad. He throws the phone, all that shit. The whole fucking, you know, what have I told you about this window? Always leave it open. You know, all that's fine. All that's fine. Gives Tootles back his marbles because Thudbutt.
I love that part.
I do too. Why do you love that part?
It's like a bookend, you know. Oh, I got your marble. Like it's kind of like, oh, good, he's got his marbles. Like, look how happy he is. And then yeah, and it is kind of stupid. Like he's like kicking his heels and floating off into the sky, and like
That's
another
the
touch too much moment.
That's the touch to, that's the hat on the hat, right? That's where Tootles gets his marbles back, and it's lovely, and that's all we need. And then Peter's crying, and then Wendy has to do the recall. "Why are you crying, boy?" You know, they're happy tears, a tear for every happy memory. And then every single person in the room goes, one for me, and one for me, and one for me. And then
that's-
Tootle goes, and then
it's
Tootle goes,
corny enough.
and one for me. And now he's flying out the window. It's, you know,
Oh man, I'm getting a friggin' cavity.
yeah,
just
that's, I
watching
mean,
this.
I gotta go to the dentist. Like, and literally at the end of the movie, like the end credits are starting to roll and Tootles is literally like still doing somersaults and floating around the sky. It's just
goofy.
it's just a little too much.
Yeah, I agree. That's funny. It's like any of the things that made this movie not well received by the audience, whether it be then or after, whatever. It seems like it stems from things that didn't need to be in the movie to begin with.
All of the things that work in the movie work so well. It's just that there's so much excess. There's so much abundance. There's so much more in it than it needs. And if you trim the fat a little bit, if you applied the Jaws less is more approach to this, you might have like an almost perfect kids movie.
I hate Peter Pan.
Thank you very much for tuning into this episode of Movie HighLow. Please send your high and low recommendations to moviehighlow@gmail.com. Spell it out, movie, HIGHLOW @gmail.com.
Now go home to your mommies.
Dear Lord, I wish I had a dad like you.
Oh, Dad, I'm sorry.